Welcome to the Rock and Roll Show podcast. We're here to share the magic of experiencing live music together with strangers and with friends, and to get to know our guests a little bit better through their concert experience. I'm your host, Alex Gadd, and I started this podcast to recapture the fun of talking about music with friends, sitting around a fire pit after dinner, finding out what band someone likes and what shows they've been to allows us to get to know and understand one another better. And hey, I just love swapping stories about shows we've seen over the years. Today, I'm excited to welcome Jason Rushforth to the podcast. Jason is our second international guest on the show, hailing from the Great White North of Canada. He's built an impressive 25-plus year career in software sales. And in fact, he was my boss at my last job. We had a good 4-year run together. And what I learned is that he's a huge music fan. I can't wait to hear all about his concert memories. Have you hear about them too? So Jason, thanks for joining us.
Awesome, Alex. Thank you, and greetings from the Great White North. Living outside of Toronto, Canada, I love the topic of music and having the conversation today. I know you and I, over the years, have had spatterings of conversation, good stories, and I'm excited to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Let's just start off with how music came into your life. I know you started off when you were a kid, you were an athlete first and foremost,
hmm
but how did music permeate your existence?
If I didn't play hockey, which is like a rite of passage up here in Canada, I would have loved to have been a guitar player or a drummer or do something else, but that never manifested that way. Music came into my life at a very young age, right? I lived in a house where my father, being British, always had music playing in the house. Discovered the Beatles at a very young age because he had the Red Album, which is like their greatest hits, I believe.
One of the two. Yeah,
And
they had two
yeah,
greatest hits records, the blue and the red.
the blue and the red. It was, I think, Help was on the red one, if I'm not mistaken. It was like the second record, track number one, maybe. And when I first heard that song, played it over and over again in my sister's bedroom. She had a record player. I put it on, I'd spin it, I'd listen to it, and I'd just keep playing it over and over. And I started to realize that music was something that motivated me. It moved me. It had impact on my life. And I started listening to a lot more music at a very young age where other kids didn't really care. I was like going home, listening to music. I always had music playing in do you remember those yellow Sony you put
Absolutely.
your tape in? I had one of those and I would listen to it every day walking to school, and it became a big part of my life. And when you think about playing hockey or any sport and getting pumped up, I would go in the dressing room and always have a headset on, always listening to music that moved me and got me motivated for whatever the game is or whatever I was doing.
Did you have a favorite first band at some point? Usually we latch on to a band early on. For me, it was Kiss.
Yeah, it was Kiss. It was Kiss. In grade one, my brother being a metalhead, I was dressed as a clown. My mom do his makeup, and my brother did my face like Gene Simmons from Kiss. We had an 8-track player in our basement, and I would listen to Kiss Alive 1 over and over again. I remember goosebumps I would get when Detroit Rock City would play. And it was like my first real band that I was like, oh, I love these guys. It obviously transitions over the years, but
Sure.
Kiss was top of the block for me when I first heard them.
Yeah, me too. Exactly the same. I had a kid bring the Rock and Roll Over album into second grade class as show and tell, and he played the first song was I Want You. It starts
Yeah.
off with a slow intro and then it gets super
Yeah.
aggressive, and my head almost exploded. And I was like, this is what I want to get. Whatever that is,
That's
I
it.
want that feeling.
That's
So I
right. That's
heavily
right.
into it, playing with my street hockey sticks, playing air guitar,
Yeah. I
I mean,
love that.
yeah. So how did that transition into your first concert? When did you see your first concert?
My first real concert, I was in grade 7, maybe. It's growing up. My brother went to every single concert. My mom said I could never go, too much drinking and drugs and all the things that go with it. My first real concert was Motley Crüe, Girls, Girls, Girls tour in Maple Leaf Gardens. And I was fairly young, and it was fairly provocative back in the day. And then
Yeah,
Motley Crüe for part of my life was everything. I had Motley Crüe posters everywhere. I wore Motley Crüe t-shirts. I thought I'm absolutely going to be Tommy Lee when I grow up. Clearly, I look
fantastic.
nothing like him.
He doesn't look anything like him anymore either, so that's fine.
No, he doesn't. Getting old.
So Motley Crue, who opened for Motley Crue? Do you remember?
It may have been poison. I went. My brother said, "Look, you gotta." I sat with him while he drank beers because I was quite young to be
Right.
drinking beer, and he's usually the opening act. You don't worry about Jay. You go in for the headline, and so I sat with him at a bar. He drank
I
beers.
see.
I went into the concert.
Do you remember what the best part of that show or the most outrageous part of that show was? Because for your first concert going experience, I imagine that sensory overload seeing that.
Tommy Lee always has really spectacular, and I walked out of there and I said, I want to be a drummer. I don't want to be a lead singer. I don't want to play guitar. I want to be a drummer. Other than the half naked girls at the back of the stage doing background vocals, Tommy Lee had a drum kit that went in circles. It was on this, it was
A
like a
bimble.
ball. Yeah, like a hamster ball. And he was playing this drum solo upside. And I was like, I turned to my brother and I said, is this what every drum solo is like? I've never seen anything like it ever. His one in Dr. Feelgood tour was also really amazing, but that was like sensory overload for me. I was like, oh my God, I know every song. I love Motley Crue. There's pyrotechnics and laser lights everywhere, but drum solo was something I'll never forget.
I imagine it was. That's incredible. Now, at this point, you're early in high school, I guess.
Yeah, I'm at that point, I'm like grade 7, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting dynamic with Canadian rock fans in that you know all the American acts, but then there are a ton of Canadian acts that never crossed over. For every Brian Adams and Loverboy, there's a
Yeah.
Tragically Hip or a Max Webster that
Yeah.
never translated to America. Did you have a
No.
favorite local band?
Oh my, like we were tragically hip. Like I love Rush, but
Right.
Rush the
Rush
both.
was international. They were massive.
Neil Young International, but the hip you if I think about my youth in high school and every kid coming in when you first had CD players in the car, it was like Road Apple, Tragically Hip, Full Blast, and none of us could understand why they never transitioned to the US. They played Dan Aykroyd had
Yep.
them on Saturday Night Live,
That was one of the best Saturday Night Live music
yeah,
performances ever.
and you could go see them in a bar with 20 other people in North Carolina when they would tour, yet they would sell out 4 nights in a row at Maple Leaf Gardens or wherever they were playing.
Right.
They were iconic to this country. Gord Downie, the lead singer, passed away 3 or 4 years ago. And when they played their last concert in Kingston, which is where they're from, just outside of east of Toronto by 2 hours driving, tickets were selling for like $23,000. I was looking to go. They played in the little junior A hockey arena. The prime minister of the country was there. And every single person I know, we had everybody. This is my backyard, right? I have a bar over there somewhere and big screen TV. We had it set up, and there's hundreds of people, and everybody watched. They aired the concert live, and his brain was going, right? I don't know if you know this. And they had to print in the corporate world when you do a PowerPoint presentation at an event, they have what are they called? There's a name for the monitor, and they play the words you're supposed to
Oh,
be saying. And
teleprompter. Yeah, yeah.
teleprompter. There's a new name for it. I forget what it's called, but he had a teleprompter in front of him because he didn't know the lyrics to all of his songs.
Right.
And he went out and gave like the most amazing concert ever. I wish I was there live. Obviously, $23,000 is a lot to pay to see him, but the hip was and are one of the most iconic Canadian bands that never were. They
Right.
are loved and revered in this country. They've won plethora of awards. They've been recognized by the government, and yet 1 hour south of here in Buffalo, no one's ever heard of them.
Sure. I in Burlington, Vermont, where I went to college, I was a DJ at a rock station, and they caught on in Burlington, and we had them out on Lake Champlain on a ferry that went between Burlington, Vermont, and Plattsburgh, New York. We
Oh,
had them
awesome.
play for contest winners. They played one of the best shows I've ever seen on a ferry for maybe 100 people, maybe, not
Yeah.
maybe 50 people. And they
It's
were
crazy.
incredible. They were
Yeah.
incredible. And I went on to see them in New York. I saw them in Montreal. I saw
Yep.
them again in Burlington a couple years later. And I too never could figure out how they weren't translating. Their songs were fantastic. They were
Yep.
very Canadian in subject matter, but
Yep.
they also translated far beyond that. And then I watched that final concert live on an internet stream and
Yep.
cried. Like I was crying.
Oh,
You
people
know, it
were
was
crying. People were crying in my
oh my God.
backyard.
It was incredible.
They,
And he was so cool. He was dressed in all like blue lame with a big
yeah.
hat and a
Ah,
feather in his hat.
with
Yeah,
what
it was
his
so
outfit
great.
was.
So
It was
yes,
awesome.
that is the biggest shame is that the Tragically Hip, in my mind, for Canadian music didn't translate because Rush,
Yeah.
Loverboy, Brian Adams, Neil Young, there were Joni Mitchell, tons of people did
Yeah.
cross over, and somehow they just never did.
They never
Um,
did.
did you ever see them live?
Oh, I have a good story to tell. And yes, I've seen them. I'm Canadian. I've seen them 100 times live, whether it's at Canada Day celebrations or whatever. So I worked with a guy who played in a band, and they were really not a great band, but they were a bunch of old dads who played in the band, and the guitarist of that band was the accountant for the Tragically Hip. So I'm not dating my wife at the time. This is the 90s. And he says, you should come watch us play. It's like 40 minutes from my house. I drive to the bar. I walk in. There's not human being in the bar. And the guy that sits next to me with his wife is Gord Downey, the lead singer of the Tragically Hip, with his wife. We had a conversation. He went to watch his accountant play for an hour. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, I think the most memorable was Maple Leaf Gardens again. I'm dating myself. The Tragically Hip album was it Fully Completely, I believe. They opened for Rush on the Roll the Bones tour. How iconic Canadiana do you absolutely get? And Rush didn't cut the Hip short, and the Hip played a full set as if they were headliner. And then Rush played their full set, and it was off the chart. People going nuts.
I would go nuts. That would be the
Yeah,
greatest double bill. And for
it
Rush to
was
give
good.
the Hip that credit and that freedom and that respect to
Yeah.
play their full set is really cool. Well,
Uh,
how many shows do you think you've seen overall, Jay?
in my life,
Round number.
250,
Yeah.
probably.
And how far have you traveled? What's the concert that took you the longest to get to?
So it's hard to answer that question. I've seen concerts in California. I've not seen concerts in Europe that I can think of. For work, this whole thing that happens that people don't recognize is that all of these artists perform privately. And so I've seen tons of private venues. with Foo Fighters, Red Hot Chili Peppers, bands like that. A lot of them in California. I've seen Aerosmith and Motley Crüe in Chicago at the amphitheater. I don't even remember the name of the amphitheater now. For the most part, I'm seeing concerts in kind of the Toronto, New York, upstate New York, Chicago, where I go a lot, Florida, California, but like never nothing crazy. I never traveled that far to see a concert. How about you?
Yeah, I've never left North America. I've never seen a
Yeah,
concert anywhere else. I've been in Europe a ton, and I almost saw Springsteen and Billy Joel 2 days in a row a couple years ago at in Hyde Park in London. But the timing didn't work out, so I didn't go. But yeah, I've seen shows in Atlanta, Minneapolis, Austin, Texas. I saw Pearl Jam last year before our customer event. So yeah, just traveling, but rarely do I travel for a concert. I try to see a concert while I'm traveling for work, as you mentioned.
that's it. That's
Yeah,
exactly it.
yeah. So, of all those concerts, do you have a favorite? Is there a way to put a finger on the most amazing concert you ever saw, or a couple of them? What would they be?
I think of concerts like this, right? Sometimes the sound is shitty, the vocals are bad, but there's such a high energy in the stadium that the people singing, the people you're with, the fun and energy you bring to the concert returns itself. And you walk in and go, that was unbelievable. And then you read the newspaper the next day, and some critic like, that was the worst concert I've ever seen. And here's the reasons why. I think every concert and every artist I've watched perform, you take something different out of it. I've seen the Rolling Stones. I think you just recently saw an unbelievable concert. Was it my favorite? No. I think my favorite concerts are the ones I had the lowest expectation going in and the highest feeling coming, the most excited feeling going. Katy Perry. I took my kids to see her in Chicago. We bought tickets. It was a destination concert. And my wife and I, we had to split up because I have 4 kids. So my 4 kids sat a few rows back. I was in second row floor. I'm like, it's Katy Perry. What can you expect? It was one of those mind blowing concerts. I was like, that was unbelievable. It was a performance. People were singing. It was a lot of fun. It was lots of props and stuff happening. But undeniably, going to the Metallica Black Album tour back to back nights was at a scale and something I've never seen in my life. So I'm not answering your question because I don't know
Oh,
if I
you are.
have an answer.
No, you're answering it the right way. Is that there's not one
Yeah,
answer.
no, there isn't.
Yeah, for some people, they have one thing that stood out like beyond. But for most people, again, when you've seen 250 shows, you have all kinds of experiences that are
Yep,
unique and special in their own way.
yep, good, bad, and all sorts of things
Right.
in between.
Have you ever discovered a band only by going to see the show and perhaps catching the opening act, not knowing who they were, and then been blown away by them?
I was a mega, and I was a mega Pantera fan. And I became a Pantera fan only because I went to go. They were at the Horse Coliseum in the Toronto exhibition. They have this building that's now been repurposed for junior and junior hockey, and it was filled with dirt on the ground. And they would tranche horses around for the Canadian National Exhibition. And Pantera was the opening act for Skid Row. And I was also partially Canadian, Sebastian Bach, and I saw Pantera, and I was like, "Who?" I had no expectation, so I will never forget. I went home on the GO train that night. I said to my brother, "We have this Pantera vulgar display of power." I put it on. It was like 3 in the morning. We were drinking beers, and we played it full blast. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, one of my all-time favorite bands." I don't listen to them that much now, but as a kid, that was a band that I picked up by watching an
Yeah,
opening act.
I love those stories. For me,
Yeah.
I went to see Scorpions and Bon Jovi opened, and I had no idea who Bon Jovi was. No idea.
In and Out of Love.
Yeah,
What was
it was
that?
still Runaway, I think, or maybe it was In
Runaway.
and Out of Love by then, but the second album, but no idea who they were. I was there
Yeah.
to see the Scorpions. got in and happened to catch the opening act and was
Yeah.
blown away. So finding those gem bands, and then like you said with Pantera and Bon Jovi is a similar thing.
Yep.
They blow up and become massive headliners unto themselves.
Oh, it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it really is. I love those things. Do you have a favorite type of venue? Do you like going to arenas, clubs, theaters, amphitheaters, stadiums? Is there a thing that you like more than others or not as much as others?
Depends on what kind of music. But you're gonna go see Elton John or the Stones. You're gonna see them in a mega, like a football stadium or a baseball stadium, sometimes open air, sometimes it's a dome. And I don't find the concert that intimate. I like more intimate venues. So I love Scotiabank Center back in the day, Maple Leaf Gardens to go see concerts because there's not a bad seat in the house.
Right.
Sound is usually pretty good, and you're closer to the artist. If you're in the top nosebleeds of the Rolling Stones concert, you're watching a monitor. So I like indoor for the most part. I like to be close to the stage, and I like it to be as small as possible.
Yeah, I feel very similar. As you grow with a musician and an artist, if they get more successful, you don't have a choice anymore. You have to go see them
Yep.
in an arena or a stadium. And so I've seen the majority of my concerts at Madison Square Garden and in
Yep.
arenas, but that's because of the bands that I seek out. I do
Right.
like going to clubs and theaters. Theater is really the perfect midpoint for me, where
Yep.
clubs you really is hit and miss. If they're in a theater, you already know what kind of performer they are, and they're just still on
Hmm.
the up or on the downside. Have you done a lot of festivals? Any festivals?
Yes.
Okay.
I had done festivals, not like Lilith Fair, but like I've done
Run by another
things.
Canadian, Sarah McLachlan.
Now she's very talented. So there was something called Edge Fest up at Barry Molson Park, about an hour north of Toronto. It's usually a couple-day venue with, at that time, alternative bands like Soundgarden or Nine Inch Nails. And then we used to always have Canada Day celebrations at the same venue. And so I've seen some act like, crazy enough, it's Canada Day, and I watched Van Halen headline on Canada Day at Molson Park. But I have been to festivals. I'm getting way too old to go now. Like my
Yeah.
kids are talking about, there's a famous event called Boots and Heart country venue up here in Toronto or north of Toronto. It's 4 days of sleeping in mud. And I'm too old for that. I always say to my kids, I'd rather spend money, fly on a plane, go see the artist that I want to see, and sleep in my hotel room.
I'm with you 100%. I've actually the only festival I ever saw was another roadside attraction, which was a Tragically Hip festival in
Yes.
Montreal back in
Yeah.
90, I think it was 93. And that was amazing. And that's the only festival I've ever gone to because I don't like all the dirt and
No.
walking around and having to fight your way into front of one thing and then you're not in position to see the next
Yeah.
act or
Yeah.
too much for me. But I
Too.
understand their value. My brother, in fact, is works for a production company that produces only rock festivals and music festivals.
Oh wow.
So he's always saying, "You got to come with," and I always say, "I don't know."
If I could get in through a side door, if I could go
Yes,
through a side door, be close to the stage, watch the act that I want to see, I would go. But I'm not plugging it through the mud and sleeping in the no.
with you there. So you mentioned Kiss Alive as being foundational for you in terms of
Mhm.
getting hip to music. I think that it's interesting, and I'd love your take on this. Our generation, before MTV especially, had no way of knowing what our bands that we loved actually sounded like or looked like
Yep.
live because we got their record, we heard what they sounded like in the studio. The only way to get that was to get a live record. And live
Yep.
records serve two purposes, right? Because you also get a greatest hits record out of it and you
Yep.
get to hear how they sound. Were there other live albums that you really locked into as a kid?
Oh my God, that's a great question.
Alive is already one of the foundational ones in all
Yeah.
of rock.
Kids Alive. If you said live album right now, name them. I'd be like Kids Alive one, Kids Alive would be the first two. I love music, but I never really found myself going, I want to buy the live album. I don't know why, because probably I had their music already.
Yeah.
Motley Crüe live. I had a couple, but nothing that jumps off a page.
Do you have a favorite concert venue? Is it Maple Leaf Gardens? Is it a
It
smaller
was
place?
Maple Leaf Gardens closed, right?
Yeah.
And it's been repurposed as like a food distribution center, something
Oh,
like that.
that's
I would
terrible.
say Scotiabank Arena in Toronto is one of the best venues for concerts in the area. Tickets are close. It's intimate. It's a good place to watch music. The
Right.
acoustics in there are good.
You mentioned earlier that you had branched out into other types of music. I know you've gone to
Mm-hmm.
see country music shows as well. Tell me
Yeah.
how that transition took place and what that's like.
So growing up in the 90s, I loathed country music. The twang, I never got into it. I had a roommate in university who loved country music, and I'm like, oh, please, I can't listen to it. Country music in 2024 is very different than it was in the 90s, even early 2000s. And I say this to my kids all the time. You listen to some of the newest artists, and I was listening to this artist called Hardy. My kids are going to go see him next week. I'm debating if I go see him. And I heard him on Octane, Sirius XM. Octane is like the heavy of heavy metal channel. And what I realized, country music pivots to country rap. Let's call it soul country or authentic country. I don't listen to that very much. You've got the pop genre, and then you've got guys like Hardy, heavy metal, Jason Aldean, hard rock, Kane Brown, kind of rapish style, or Morgan Wallen, almost on that fringe of rap. And so I took my kids, my family, to Luke Combs at Scotiabank, and it was awesome. It was awesome. It was a great concert. It wasn't about pyrotechnics and set changes and shit like that. It was a guy, guitar, people singing in unison. And I started listening to it around that point a couple years ago. And I find myself liking country music. Not all, but I like a lot of country music, a lot more than I used to. Recognizing if I said, like, go put on the song Sold Out by Hardy. Go listen to that after this podcast. And you tell me what genre of music it is. You're gonna say, you'll say that's hard rock heavy metal. But the artist is country. So confusing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you hit it right on the head is that country has become so pervasive that country branches into every type of music and it's no
Yep,
longer its own type. It's a whole genre of music that has lots of
correct.
different branches. And I caught on with Zach Brown Band
Yep.
and Jason Aldean has some really rock and roll songs. Eric Church
Yeah,
is
I like
another one
yep.
that he plays songs that sound like rock and roll to me with a country tint to it for sure. Have you seen other country concerts since Luke Combs?
I saw Luke Combs. I've seen Luke Bryan. I was front row for Luke Bryan with my wife. My kids were up in the lawn in the amphitheater watching the same venue. It was a party. Luke
Yeah.
Bryan is like going to a house party and some dudes drinking beer, like slamming the guitar. It was fun. It was simple, but it was a party. It was a
Yeah,
good
that's
time.
fun. It's fun to go out and just have fun with 20,000
That's
or
it.
12,000 other
Yeah.
people.
Everyone's drinking beers. It's not a angry concert.
Right.
It's just people having
No
fun. It's
attitude.
good. And I'm always like, oh, I'd go see him again. I'd go see Luke Combs again. My kids just turned 19. They go to school in the US. So I bought them tickets to Luke Combs in the Highmark Stadium in Buffalo, Orchard Park, whatever it's
Sure.
called now. I
Sure.
don't even
Yeah. Where
remember.
the Bills play.
Yeah. And they're like, it was unbelievable. There's good performers in the country scene. But my very first country concert was I was at a fundraiser in Minnesota. Do you mind if I tell you this story quickly?
Oh, I want to hear these stories. This is what the podcast is all about.
Okay, I'm gonna step back and tell you the whole story because the whole story is nuts. So, one of my customers in a past life was a hearing aid manufacturer in Minnesota. So, part of the contract was we had to make a financial contribution to their fundraising event. So, we made the financial contribution, and the CIO calls me and says, "You have, I think it's 8 tickets for the actual grand event and 4 tickets for the house party." And I said, okay. So I buy an airline ticket. I fly to Minnesota. I invite several people that work with me that know the customer well. I said to my wife, I have zero expectation around what this is, but we'll drink some champagne. We'll have some fun. Appreciate coming. My expectations, as we talked about, Alex, were like rock bottom. I remember I was taking a limo to the house party with a guy named Pierre and his wife and my wife. And I said, holy, we drove past the football stadium in Minnesota. And I'm like, oh my God, U2's 360 tour is playing tonight. Let's go. Let's talk to the CEO. It's going to be a boring ass party and we'll go see U2. They're like, yeah, that sounds like an idea. I said, we'll get tickets. We might be a bit late, but let's just go figure that out. We get to this house party, Alex. They had to put us in a van with tarp on the van so we could not see where we were going. We pull up, and you would love this. And we pull up to this driveway. There is this mansion, and I'm talking massive. And we walk up the driveway. We're greeted by this guy. And I'm like, said to my wife, I've never seen Grey Goose sponsor a house party before. This is odd. So I go downstairs to get some sandwich and a beer. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy has like 500 personally autographed guitars from every artist you've ever desired to have a guitar. And in the middle of this room was the red piano from Elton John, bequeathed to the CEO, signed by Elton John on the top of the red piano. And I was like, wow, this guy's into music, like big time. Once again, zero expectation. I walk up and I go to use the washroom and I'm like, excuse me. And it was Miley Cyrus who was blocking the door to the bathroom in this house party. I use the restroom. My wife goes, you got to come see this. You're not going to believe it. I'm like, what's that? She's like, Kevin Costner and his band are playing the full 2 sets tonight in the garage of the house party. And they had this tarp up, and then we met Gary Busey, Mini Me, the Minnesota Vikings, the Twins. There was celebrities wall to wall in this place. And it was a really fun night. And I remember Miley Cyrus, she's dancing around and they're pouring her basically straight vodka into this glass. And her protectors are like hiding the glass. And she's like spitting it through a straw. Wait, the next night we go to this gala event. And the gala event had a concert. And the concert was Garth Brooks. And it was unbelievable. I didn't like Garth Brooks. He played 7 songs on the acoustic guitar and then holds it up and says, who wants to buy this guitar? How much do you think the guitar sold for?
$10,000.
See, that's what I would have said, but I'm among the millionaires and mega millionaires. Somebody bought it for like $285,000. He signed it, handed it to the lady, and then that money went to the charity. The surprise of the night, Miley Cyrus. I actually talked to her in an after party, and I said, I am shocked of how good she played Landslide. She was playing like not the Hannah Montana, but she was super talented. This is really good. She played Every Rose Has Its Thorn by Poison. It was one of these venues where I was just like, that was really good. And Meatloaf, true story. I'm walking and I said something about the dashboard light. He grabbed my face and kissed me on the lip. Meatloaf did at this event. But my first real country exposure was Garth Brooks, this private event that we were at. It was unbelievable.
What an incredible experience.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, Garth Brooks really ushered in that era of country crossover to rock and roll and pop music because he
Yeah.
loved Billy Joel and he loved all of the rock musicians
And if
from the
you listen
70s.
closely, you can hear that influence in
Yeah.
their music, especially country artists.
On the other side of that, have you ever seen a band where you said, you know what, I'm so disappointed, I never want to see them again?
Morrissey.
Yeah. He makes it hard. He makes it hard to like him.
It wasn't my genre of music. Somebody said, "You want to come with me?" I went to the concert. I was like, "Oh my god!" But and you're gonna fall out of your chair with what I say next. I'm a huge Eagles fan. I went to see the Eagles at the Canadian National Exhibition, and I was so underwhelmed. I sat there. There were people falling asleep in the stand. They stood. They played. The sound was shitty. And I remember because RoboCop came out on stage. I'm not sure why, but RoboCop, the movie, I think it was a
Yes,
movie.
as a movie. Peter Weller was the star.
He's yeah. And so RoboCop came on stage at one point, but I was like, this concert could be so amazing, and it fell flat. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, never again will I pay that kind of money to go see the Eagles.
It's interesting you say that because I saw them for the first time last fall. And Don Henley actually scolded the audience and told everyone to stay seated.
Oh,
It
that's
was
not why you go to
so
concerts.
shocking. I was so disappointed in the whole thing. And they played all the mellow songs and very few of the upbeat songs.
Yeah,
By then, Glenn Frey had already died, but still, they're playing their songs. They have enough musicians. Play the good
yeah,
one. They played all
yeah,
the slow ones, which were good, but it was also underwhelming and for the money, not really worth it. I agree.
yeah.
100%. How about guest appearances? One of the things that I'm really interested in is hearing stories about you're going to see Neil Young and some other big rock star just shows up to sing a song. Have you ever had an experience like that?
It has, but the one and it wasn't like a total shocker. I saw Neil Young, Soundgarden, and Pearl Jam play because that time Pearl Jam coming up, grunge is on the scene. Somebody decided, it was probably a PR person, that Neil Young was the original king of grunge. And so when he played Keep On Rockin' in the Free World, it was him, Eddie Vedder, I think Cornell also came and sang it with them. It's a rockin' tune, but it
Oh,
was
yeah.
just like the three artists came together to play the song. It was unbelievable.
I only have a couple other questions, and they're really focused on your bucket list items. Is there a band out there today that you haven't seen that you really are dying to see?
So, yes, of course there is. You must have. I'm curious, what's your bucket list before I answer?
Of the bands that are still around, I've never seen AC/DC. I love AC/DC in an
Yeah,
unhealthy way, and I have never seen them, and it's such a shame. So if they come around, they're in Europe right now. They haven't announced North American dates. If they
yeah,
do, I will be there. That's the one for me right now. And then it was Kiss, but I almost went to their last show, which was December 2nd, I think, at Madison Square Garden, and I just
yeah.
couldn't bring myself to do it because I love Kiss from the 70s, and it's so different now
It's
that,
cheesy now.
yeah,
Not,
couldn't bring myself to. I didn't want to ruin the love that I had for them back.
that's
My
funny.
answer now is AC/DC. So now I'll turn it back
Yeah.
to you.
So I did see AC/DC at the Sky Dome Razor's Edge tour.
Oh, great.
And when they introed with Thunderstruck, they always end with For Those About to Rock. Fire cannons go off. Everybody was slamming their seats, and the whole stadium, I have goosebumps, was
Yeah, me
pounding.
too.
It was like the concrete was moving because everyone was going, "Arr," and slamming the seats. Like people were breaking the seats in the stadium.
Yeah.
It was a pretty impressive performance. For me, I really want to see Slipknot. It's a hard concert to go to. I'm an old guy walking in a very different world of who the audience is.
Yeah, that's an
Um,
aggressive crowd.
it's an aggressive crowd. And Corey Taylor, who's the lead singer of Slipknot, is also the lead singer of a band called Stone Sour. And he also has his own music, CMFT, Corey Mother Effing Taylor.
Right, which is like normal rock, like hard
Yeah.
edge rock and roll.
When they tour, a lot of times Stone Sour open for Slipknot. I'd love to go see that, but I don't know if I'm a mosh guy. So I'm on the edge there. I've seen the Stones. I've seen a lot of big bands. There's no one right now that, other than Slipknot, that I'm like, I'd love to go see Metallica again, but I've seen them a bunch of times. I do have a Metallica story. So I played junior hockey growing up. I stopped playing hockey and I'm in a men's league, and I show up to a game and it's 11 o'clock at night, and I pull in my Dodge Omni, 4-speed manual transmission, and I pull up and there is a Porsche 911 beside a Porsche 911 beside a Porsche 911. And these guys are smoking weed before they go to play hockey, and I go in the dressing room. And I'm like, immediately, these guys are what? What do you think they're drug dealers? That's what you think, right? And I walk in, I said to the one guy, I said, I gotta ask, what do you do for work? You're driving like the $100,000 plus car.
Right.
You're smoking weed, you got tats everywhere, and you got this long hair. And he goes, oh, I'm a pyrotechnic engineer. I did the Kiss Alive tour. I'm working on Metallica right now. And he was like an engineer that designed how the pots go off and so on and so forth. The other guy was a guy named Andy Curran. And he was in a band called Pony Hatch, another Canadian artist you may never have heard of. He had a song called Monkey Bars. Andy Curran was a staple in Canadian music. He was signed by Sony Music. And so I played hockey with these guys. The guy that did the pyrotechnics invited me VIP to a Metallica concert that only aired, I think, 6 or 10 shows because they had to retract. People were leaving the stadium thinking that the stadium was catching fire. And basically what happened was Hetfield in Montreal, opening for Guns N' Roses,
Oh, yeah.
stood on a pot. What happened? Boom,
And lit
blew
up
it
his
up.
arm.
I go to this venue. I'm with the guy who does the pyrotechnics in Hamilton, and I'm like literally on the rail. It's Metallica, 2 stages in this hockey arena. They play the concert. It's loud as hell. It's amazing. And at the end of it, they've been playing like Master of Puppets or something. And all of a sudden he goes, no. And these pops start going off all over the stage. What do you think they mimicked? They mimicked that there was a problem on the stage, like Montreal. The guy in the boom falls to the stage and crashes. And pots are going off everywhere. And people were leaving, running to the door. They thought the show was blowing up.
Oh.
It was amazing because they came back out and they turned on each 100-watt light bulb over their head and did their encore. But yeah, so the guy that did that played hockey with me. Yeah, but it's like this random thing. Hey, I meet this guy and he's the Metallica pyrotechnic guy. It's pretty cool. But I would love to see certain bands again, especially as they're getting older. But right now, Slipknot's the only band.
Okay. Let's figure out when that's happening. Aren't they going on tour?
They are. They're playing in Toronto in August. And
Cool.
once again, my balancing act is I could go. I don't want to sit in the back. And if I sit in the front, it's an aggressive concert.
Maybe you sit on the side in the front so you're not on the floor.
Perhaps.
Ay. I have a band for you just since we're talking about this. There's a band, a local band in Connecticut here called the Zambonis, and they write all original music about hockey. The songs are rock and roll songs about life, but they use hockey as the theme and the metaphors. You would love it. And I've interviewed the guy on the podcast who is one of the main guys, this guy, Dave Schneider, who is so smart and so interesting, and they are great. The Zambonis, check them out. And how about venues? Is there a venue that you've never been to that in your mind, you're going to go to see a live music show before you die?
Madison Square Garden.
You come down and I'll take you.
We'll go to a concert together. I'd love
Oh,
to
for
go there
sure.
too.
Oh, we'll do it. That's the place I've seen the most shows, and I love it. Is like the mother church of rock and roll.
Yeah. I have a tip. I have a tip for your viewers, by the way. Can I tell
Yes.
you my trick? How do you buy cheap concert tickets without getting scammed? So somebody once told me that it doesn't happen for every show. You have to be prepared never to get a ticket. But, and I did this for Luke Combs was playing back-to-back nights in Toronto. I was prepared to go the second night. I'd already bought my kids tickets, and I was like, I think I want to go to this concert. He went on stage around 9 o'clock at night. At 9:10, Ticketmaster released 2,000 tickets because a dude walks around the stadium with an iPad and says, we didn't sell this block right beside the stage because we didn't know how it would all configure.
Right.
And they released tickets during the venue. Boom, boom. So I had third row right beside Luke Combs on the side. Had I bought those tickets one section over, 4 seats, the day before, I would have probably paid $1,500 a seat. And the price on the ticket was like $200. I paid $80 the night before. And so my kids are like, Dad, can you do that again? I did it again for another Luke Combs concert. So if you're patient and you want to get a good deal, and you know the artist is playing back-to-back nights, or the day of the concert, when they set the stage, they will launch a block of new tickets. And if you're on Ticketmaster, you can usually get them, and you can get them less than face value.
That is a great tip. I love it. I'm going to try it immediately.
Just pick any random concert. Alex, it's Friday. There's probably a concert Sunday or Saturday at Madison Square Garden, perhaps. Just follow the ticket prices, wait for that artist to go on, go to Ticketmaster and watch them release the seat. Not every venue, not every concert, but like when I saw Elton John last year or the year before, they launched a boatload of tickets after they set up the stage.
That makes sense. It makes perfect sense what you're saying. I never thought about it like that before, but that's great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So my last question is simply this. What do you think for you keeps you going back to live music? What is it about live music that really is something that I know you well enough to know that you'll be going to live music until you can't walk anymore, and then maybe still be going to live music?
I love the party. I love to have beers, being part of like large social gatherings, but I love the energy. Like there's nothing better than looking at your arm and seeing those goosebumps come out because you've been waiting for that song and the rendition of that song was such, and people are singing. It's just, you like energy and being around people. If you love music, then for me, I love it. I can't describe it. I love going to live music, even shitty live music. I like. I'm going tonight to a restaurant that has this guy who plays guitar, and I love him on guitar. I'm not going to get goosebumps, but it's music.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know. But music's important, and it's a big part of my life. But I am also the guy, Alex, that like when I get in the car, my music is like at 11, like Final Tap. It's always loud, windows down, usually a little obnoxious. And I'm the guy that rolls down the street that way, but I love going to live music and the energy it brings and the fun you can have.
Me too. Jay, thank you so much. This has been great. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing some of your stories with us. And I look forward to seeing you soon, one way or the other, but maybe at Madison Square Garden.
Thanks, Alex. That was awesome. Thanks for having me. Cheers, bud.
And that's it for today's conversation. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back next Tuesday. And if you like what you heard today, we'd appreciate it if you would like and subscribe or follow to make sure you get notified about every new episode. And please tell your friends. Additionally, we want to know what you think, so please leave us a comment. We'll try to respond to every one of them. The Rock and Roll Show podcast is a World Highway Media production. I'm your host, Alex Gadd, and until next time, remember that life is short, so get those concert tickets.